So I can sing my song. If I come on easy, I will end up strong. Baby, you can count me in. You can count me in, so we can both step right out. Together we can improvise something worth shouting about. I will give you an inch so we can both take a mile. We can invent a syncopation that will make us smile. If we lighten up a little, we can travel in style. Baby, you can count me in. Da 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 do do do. Da da do do. Well, you don't need to memorize the words to the song. We can just make it up as we go along. When we listen to each other, we can't do it wrong. Baby, count me in. We will go sailing free. Honey, the groove is on me. Music just might be the breath of fresh air we need. 'Cause when we follow the feeling that follows the dream, we're bound to find some changes that will set us free. Even when they take us into a minor key, you can count me in. Zazu, you. Badu, badu, zoo. Da, da, do. Come on, count me in. Well, we can take and give. We can live. Surprising possibility that you might just bring out the best in me. When we expand our horizons beyond what we know, we get a whole lot further than we thought we could go. Something much wiser is running the show. We're looking at a win-win. Let's do this thing. Baby, you can count me in. I want to.
Good morning. This is Beverly Pryor. I'm the minister at Unity of the Hill Country in Kerrville, Texas. So let's just take a moment and get centered in prayer. Together, let's close our eyes and just take a deep breath in. And just slowly release that breath. With that breath, as you release the breath, just let all the busyness of the morning, all the distractions and the hurries and the worries just fade away. Just allow yourself to become present to this now moment. Just dropping into this moment, opening our hearts together in gratitude and appreciation. Just allowing ourselves to be counted in right now. So grateful for the various ways that we're able to connect, even in these unusual times. Just so grateful that we could come together. We know the presence and the power of truth, that absolute in the universe that we call God, always present in every moment. And as we join together, we feel that presence increase in our awareness, in our consciousness. And we just say, thank you. We're just so grateful. We just say thank you, thank you, thank you for this truth and so much more. And so it is. Amen. Hello, everybody. We're going to, I just wanted to see you for a second, and then I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. Oops, not the music though. Are you seeing the screen? Yes? Mandy, are you seeing the screen? Are you seeing my slides now?
I'm seeing your screen.
You're seeing the slides?
Yes.
Okay, good.
No
Thank you,
slides.
Rocio.
I don't see the slides.
Okay, you don't see the slides. That's just, you know, every day. Let me see if I can get back to the sharing. It's not giving me the screen share right now. Okay. Okay.
The major talk, I want to introduce you to my husband. When I first met him, we were both students at Baylor in the 1960s. And now for those of you who stopped listening because you've gotten out your mental calculator saying, how old is this woman? I will be celebrating my 80th birthday in June. So now come back and pay attention to the talk here. So Tom and I met at Baylor. And I don't know if this is still true at Baylor, but when Tom and I were there, it was not uncommon for couples, dating couples, to go on prayer dates. And as Tom was one of the few people on campus who had a car, it was not unlike him to come by the dormitory, pick me up. We would drive to the beautiful Cameron Park in Waco, Texas, where incidentally I grew up. And we would find the most secluded spot possible, and then Tom would pray on his date, P-R-A-Y. Now that was not the only kind of date I had with Tom. It was also the time when he invited me to join him and a group of Baylor students to go on the bus that Baylor had chartered to take us from Waco to Dallas to hear the Billy Graham revival. And I thought that was really cool, and I would be less than honest if I didn't admit that maybe part of the incentive for going on this kind of date meant that I got to stay out considerably past the curfew hour at my dormitory. Perhaps the most memorable date at Baylor with Tom Gandy occurred when he and I and a large group of Baylor students went to the Baptist church we were attending, gathered in the balcony to hear this renowned revivalist called Dr. Angel Martinez. And so after Dr. Martinez had given his fire and brimstone talk, of course, the invitation was issued. And I can tell you, after about 8 or 9 verses of Just As I Am, it became increasingly clear that nobody was planning to walk down that aisle that night. So Tom nudged me and said, out of here. You guessed it, folks. When we stood up to leave the balcony, Dr. Angel Martinez lifted his arms and said, the young couple in the balcony are coming down, no doubt. And Tom and I were way too humiliated and embarrassed to leave. And so it was that we were the only 2 people who walked down the aisle that night. Now, what would help you understand these aspects of our dating is that Tom came to Baylor with the intention of going immediately thereafter to the Baptist seminary. And while I knew I could be a lot of things and do a lot of things well, a minister's wife never made that list. So by the time we were seniors, Tom was engaged to another Baylor co-ed who was happy to follow him to the seminary. And I did the only thing a girl in my situation could do, and that is I married a Texas Aggie. So over the next 28 years, Tom and I each married, we raised a family, and subsequently we both divorced. And so it was 28 years after graduating from Baylor with no contact whatsoever in between, our paths serendipitously crossed, and we found ourselves now husband and wife. And each of us, I might add, had had a variety of careers. Tom had long since moved from ministry and in fact spent the bulk of his career in the oil fields of Libya and Tunisia. So now here's the rest of the story. I've always considered myself as basically fearless, ready to try a new adventure at the drop of a hat, provided that adventure was of my own choosing. And therein is the catch. Almost 8 years ago, Tom was diagnosed with frontal lobe dementia. This is a form of Alzheimer's. And by default, I became his full-time caregiver. And as one who had always firmly believed that we should and could pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps, I suddenly found myself married to someone who no longer had bootstraps. And so it was naively in the beginning, I said to myself, well, exactly how hard can this caregiving thing be? I was not prepared for the answer that showed up immediately. It can be very challenging. My career as a speaker and a facilitator came to a grinding halt when airline travel was no longer an option. And for others like me who found themselves suddenly cast in the role of a caregiver, we would go to Alzheimer's caregivers meetings, but we would hear depressing statistics like this one. It is not unusual for the caregiver to die before the person that he or she is caring for because you surrender care of self in order to take care of this loved one. Well, that got my attention. And I thought, okay, I better figure out this caregiver thing. And having been a student of Unity Principles since the mid-'80s, I turned to our 5 Unity Principles to see if perhaps there was some guidance and some answers in there for me on this journey. And of course there was. Unity Spiritual Principle number 1 says God is absolute good and everywhere present. This principle maintains that we are all one with God. So for me, this meant that God must be as present in Tom as he is in me. And the aha was it was not God who had abandoned Tom, but perhaps from time to time, it was harder for me to see the God in Tom. But as can be common with a lot of Alzheimer's patients, Tom became mesmerized with nature. He would spend hours sitting on our back porch, which has an extremely pastoral view, commenting on the beauty of the clouds, the color of the sky, the greenness of the trees. And this fascination with nature would even show up when we were driving in the car during rush hour traffic. And so while I was caught up in angst and anger about why all these people weren't driving the way I thought they should, don't they know how to drive in rush hour, Tom was instead looking out his side of the car, commenting on the beauty of the trees, their greenness, their clouds, the rain, whatever. And so I thought, okay, he was again looking at life from God's perspective, and I was choosing to react primarily to what the human in me wanted to see. But his perspective seemed to be way more calming than mine. And so I came up with this new mantra that I said every single day. I am a safe and courteous driver surrounded by safe and courteous drivers. And I will tell you, I have mastered the safe part of that. And I may still be a work in progress on the courteous part occasionally during rush hour. All right. Unity Spiritual Principle number 2 said we humans have a spark of divinity in us. We are the very essence of God, and therefore we are inherently good. I was struck by the fact that Principle 2 did not say all humans except those with Alzheimer's have a spark of divinity in them. So where was this spark of divinity in Tom? More often than not, his behavior could show up as almost anything but divine. And as a result, in the beginning, more often than I care to admit, I could go on these frustrated rants when Tom would ask me the same question over and over and over again. And in the meantime, I would wallow in my guilt for sometimes losing my temper or being short-tempered. And Tom, who would have already forgotten it, would just smile sweetly and tell me how much he loved me. Actually, unity principle number 2 is where I learned the gift of surrender and laughter. So here's an example. It was not uncommon on any given afternoon, about mid-afternoon, Tom would say, "So what's for dinner tonight?" And I would say, "Well, Tom, I'm going to make chicken pot pie for you." "Oh, that's great," he said. "Do we have any plans for dinner tonight?" Clearly, he didn't hear me. "Yes, Tom, I'm fixing chicken pot pie." "Oh, I like that," he said. "So what are we having for dinner tonight?" Well, it was this spiritual principle that taught me the gift of laughter and creativity, because I learned to give Tom a different answer every time he asked the question. So here's what it sounded like now. "Tom, what are we having for dinner tonight?" "Me, I'm fixing chicken pot pie." 2 minutes later, "So what are our plans for dinner tonight?" "Tom, I thought I would make a nice salad for us and put some chicken on it." "Oh, that sounds good," he says. "Do we have any plans for dinner tonight?" Okay, you get the gist and see where this was going. But here's what I came to realize. Tom had no curiosity at all about what we were having for dinner. He was really making conversation the only way he knew how. And again, he was being more unitic about this probably than I was. Unity spiritual principle number 3 said our thoughts influence our experiences. And I'll just tell you right now, this is the unity principle, which I tend to have an ongoing love-hate relationship. Now, while I freely admit that many of my thoughts create the reality in which I find myself, show me where I ever said, "Show me how to be a caregiver for somebody with Alzheimer's." Why would I create something for which I was so totally unprepared? But God, in this spiritual principle, of course, one more time, had the answer. You see, for quite a while, I had more or less quit consulting God on what was next for me. I had that all figured out. I was ready to run with it. And then this other mantra that I heard Reverend Ellen Davenport give at our church many times when she was our minister. And that mantra is, "Lead me where you need me and speak to me in ways I cannot possibly misunderstand." So God, in his wisdom, got my attention the only way he knew how. I need to find a way to stop Dottie in her tracks and remind her that we are on this journey together and that it is a spirit-directed journey. You see, it was this principle that supported me in shifting my self-made label of caretaker to that of caregiver. And while in the beginning I may not have always been the best caregiver, eventually I think I figured that role out pretty well. Principle 3 for me is about hitting the pause button long enough for co-created thoughts to emerge. Unity spiritual principle number 4 says, through prayer and meditation, our hearts and minds are aligned. This principle holds that prayer puts our belief in the first 3 principles to the test. And as a full-time caregiver, what that meant to me is prayer is where I needed to go, calm down, to get re-centered. And a lot of the outside stuff, a lot of the without stuff was just that. It was stuff. So when I finally surrendered to the thought not exist in my resume, my good deeds, or my self-proclaimed way forward. It was the freest I had felt in my entire life. I no longer had the burden of proving to myself that I was solely responsible for what life gave me, but rather through an accelerated devotion to prayer and meditation, the challenges of caregiving now seemed bearable and for the most part, even desirable. So how did this show up in my newly defined role as a caregiver? For all the things that Tom could no longer remember how to do, he steadfastly remembered how to play gin rummy, and he could even keep the score in his head. And it was through prayer and a lot of meditation that I trained myself to be able to play 2 to 3 hours of gin rummy day after day, week after week, month after month. If there was any redemption to this at all, it was that maybe 1 in about 30 games I could actually beat Tom in gin rummy. Okay, Unity spiritual principle number 5 says, knowing and understanding these principles is not enough. We must live the truth that we know. And for me, living these principles was more about being than it is about doing. And when I realized that, my world shifted in ways I could never have imagined. Around mid-October of 2017, I found myself struggling to get Tom out of bed one morning. He was having some balance issues and steadfastly and stubbornly refused to use a walker or anything else. So after a few minutes of struggling, I said to Tom, let's just lie back on the bed. We're going to chill out and I'm going to figure this out. In about 5 minutes, Tom very quietly tapped me on the shoulder. And with what I say was no evidence or hint of Alzheimer's whatsoever in his eyes, he said quietly to me, I'm ready to die. And 6 weeks later, on November 27th, 2017, Tom peacefully transitioned. You see, his soul's agreement to experience Alzheimer's was not his way of punishing me. It was his gift to me. And it was Tom who had volunteered for the harder role. The debt of gratitude I owe this man will never have any limits or boundaries. And while I don't always know what's next for me, I do know it is what I learned from Unity's 5 principles on this journey that will always factor in my what's next. Now, there's one other principle that I would like to throw in here. It was not in Unity's principles, but rather was found in the lyrics of a Beatles song called I Get By With a Lot of Help from My Friends. And I can tell any of you who have been caregivers, we know that we don't survive this journey without a lot of help from our friends. And here's a couple of examples I'd like to share with you. Tom enjoyed eating at a small Mexican restaurant near our home. However, for someone with Alzheimer's, reading a menu is overwhelming, challenging, and can be very upsetting. So the waiter who usually took care of us, I took him aside one time, explained what was going on with Tom, and he said, Mrs. Gandy, I've got this. So from that point forward, when we would go to that restaurant, this waiter would rush up to the table, grab Tom's menu and say, Tom, you won't need that menu tonight. I'm fixing you my specialty. And he would prepare the only dish on the menu that he knew Tom liked. And I will also say that during Tom's memorial service, when it was my turn to speak, in the last row of that massive church, there sat that waiter. Another example of getting by with a lot of help from my friends, Tom and I had this great, Jan and John Belcher had been our best friends for years, and they would continue to invite us to go to movies and dinner every weekend. Now, Tom would sleep during the movies because the Alzheimer's mind doesn't have the capacity to follow a plot or remember what happened. But I could nonetheless sense that he loved doing what normal people were doing. But then the real blessing for me is when we all went to dinner afterwards, Jan would engage Tom, I'm not sure how, in 30 minutes of conversation. And I could draw a breath and have a normal adult conversation with her husband. So there are dozens more examples of support that I could offer you, even as I know if you're in this position, you have your own examples. But there's one additional principle that I would, or this principle I added for this reason. One does not survive the caregiver's journey without a lot of help. And so the question comes up for me almost 3 years after Tom's passing. Why am I giving this message now? Why me? Why this? Why now? Well, I saw a statistic recently. It said if you are 50 years of age and alive today, 80% of you will either be a caregiver or need a caregiver. And I'm here to remind you that when those circumstances occur, it is your 5 unity principles that will not only help you survive the journey, but thrive on your journey, either as a caregiver or one being cared for you. So if you are a caregiver, you have been a caregiver, or you may someday be a caregiver, you have my undying love, support, appreciation, and gratitude. Thanks to all of you, and thank you, Beverly, for the opportunity to share this story.
Thank you, Dottie. I'm just overwhelmed with gratitude and appreciation for you, for sharing and touching our hearts today. It was so nice to kind of remember. I could see Tom and all the ways you described him, and just it was nice to have a little visit with him through your stories, and that was really beautiful. Thank you so much.
Kerrville, you and I also have talked about, and this is something for the rest of you who are listening to discuss with Beverly offline. We talked about whether there would be some value in offering a workshop around that topic. Why me? Why this? Why now? And using the unity principles to come up with the why not. So if that is something that would appeal to you, talk about it with Beverly, and I would be honored and happy to participate in that with you. So Beverly, back to you, and thanks to all of you.
Thank you, Dottie. I really appreciate that. And that is definitely something that we will look to get on the schedule, because I know after meeting you and hearing from you that people will definitely be interested in the topic. And so taking off of Dottie's suggestions and her own practice, your weekly practice this week is to ask yourself, when you get into a little bit of a situation where you're feeling frustrated or you're having some kind of emotion or reaction, ask yourself those questions: why me, why this, why that, whatever it is, the big why, and then switch to why not. Just give yourself a deep breath and ask yourself, why not? Why do I think this is not my path? And how can I just embrace whatever it is? So practice as Dottie has the why not. And so now we have a moment to spend a little bit more time with Boone Holding. And Boone, are you on? There you are.
I am on. Dottie, that was so moving, Dottie. That was really, really, really awesome to listen to. Thank you very much. Thank you. You know, I chose this song. This song that I'm going to do is called Dreaming Again, or Dreaming Again, depending on what state you're from, I suppose. But it's actually a self-reflection song as well in its own way. And I started to write this song when I was about like 21 or 22 years old, and I wasn't very good at the guitar or understanding how to put songs together, and so I had just left the song alone. And years later, a friend of mine reminded me of the song and said, I really like that little song you did. And so I had finished the song, but I was older and I had seen more of life, and my thoughts were a little bit different on the concept that I had started writing about. And so the song ended up becoming more of a reflection song of like a transition of where I started to where I am and what helped me get there. And I just thought back to being a musician in the state of Texas and all of my friends and family that excelled me to the levels of growth that I was able to achieve. And I mean, I'm just a regular guy. I'm not special in any way, but you know, I was in some dark places, and I know my friends and my family, if not for them, who knows where those places would have ended up. And so this song kind of became that. But thank you for your inspiration, Dottie. I mean, that was just incredible. So this is called Dreaming Again. I woke up today with the sun to the west. It seems such a strange thing. I'm living like this. My next step, I never can guess. I'm just trying to make a living, and I do my best. Most of the time, anyways. Away with my insight. Tonight, I need a friend. Kindness is blind. What does it really take to win? Well, this small Texas town has me dreaming again. So I took a stroll down this old county road. This beat-up truck, it feels like it might explode. And I'm trying to get into the next time zone, but besides my own thoughts, I'm all alone. Well, I got this guitar in my hand. On land, my journey begins. I somehow got tossed and lost in this old town. And then, well, you might know what happened next. This small Texas town has me dreaming again. There I go, just dreaming. Bluebonnet fields and a million fence posts. Lord, she changed. When you get near the coast, all these different landscapes, I better make the most. When you don't really drink too much, a song is pretty much your toast. So here's my chance to do it. This is a toast to my family and all of my friends in a state that has taught me what you can do with a pen. It's pretty crazy from my perspective. This small Texas town has me dreaming again. I'm dreaming again. Woke up today with the sun to the east. The birds were singing with me, and my mind was at peace. Thank y'all for listening again. I really appreciate it. Thank you for having me. Unity,
Awesome.
y'all are really inspiring to me.
Thank you so much, Boone. I really appreciate you so much. And I wanted to mention to everyone, Boone has a website, who'sboone.com, if you were interested in hearing more of his songs and possibly buying a CD or supporting him in any way. You can learn more about Boone at his website. So I just wanted to mention, as we do every week, how grateful we are for the continued support that you are giving through our website. You can give online, and many of you are mailing checks in and sometimes even dropping them off. And Mandy's in the office Monday through Thursday from 10 to 2. So she'll take those for you. And we appreciate the U.S. Postal Service for delivering the mail. So we'll close today with our Prayer for Protection by James Dillett Freeman. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. The presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is. So we'll see you next week. We will have music and a talk by Paul Hilliard, as Connie Lucas referred to him, our own Paul Hilliard, because he's now become one of our regular musicians, just as Boone is. And feel free to invite friends, share the link. And now we'll open up the lines so we can, Mandy, if you'll unmute everybody so we can all say hello to one another.
Hello, Beverly.
Hello, hey Odie.
Hello,
everybody.
Hello.
Hey Paul. Hello. Annette, good to see you.
Hello. Hi.
You can turn your cameras on too so you can be seen. I see Danny joined us this week. Hey Danny and Hetty.
Howdy.
And hi Penny and Sylvia. And Kara and Jerry. And Rick and Barb. So you guys can say hello to Dottie directly. This is her receiving line.
Thank you,
Hello,
Dottie.
Dottie.
Thank you.
How's everybody doing?
Good.
Hang in there.
Hey Jack.
Hello.
I see Dave
Good,
Russell.
good.
Hey Danny,
Hi,
you
Bev.
finally got on with us. Oh, Mark and Gayleen. Hi Gayleen, we haven't seen you on camera yet. Good to see you.
I'm a little camera shy.
Hey, Mark.
I like y'all's backdrop there.
That'd be
Thanks,
all.
Alden.
And of course, Mandy Scott is there. She's been in the background admitting people and supporting.
Good job, Mandy.
Hi. Thanks everybody for being a part of the